Hiya! Welcome to this, my 36th episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, and in this installment, titled The Podcast That Fell to Earth, I celebrate new Dr. Jodie Whittaker. My classic collection turns up some cool episodes of The Shield and Boston Legal, and in my current collection, I chat about Murphy Brown, BoJack Horseman, and take on a few of my nerd shows. Welcome to the show!
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.
In What's Going On With Me, your guess is as good as mine. Between the editing process taking the whole week last time and the new Doctor Who premiering actually on Sunday last weekend, I spent this past week writing this up in hopes of recording and editing it actually this weekend. This gives me a unique opportunity to comment on the actual destruction of the world, since the Doctor is now a woman, to see how all the predictions by infuriated bloggers complaining about it panned out. Still here? Well, I'll keep going. Continuing a departure I can attribute largely to my classic collection being stuck in dedicated collections like Battlestar Galactica and The Shield, I'm going to focus on the main reason this one is running so late this time. To wit, welcome to the 15th regeneration of the Doctor, this time as presented by Ms. Jodie Whittaker.
What I've been watching.
Yep, the 11th season premiere of Doctor Who, titled The Woman Who Fell to Earth and recorded to disc X191, is so recent I haven't even cataloged it yet, and I will talk about it, but we plunge headlong into this story like we've all just watched the last two episodes of season 10 and Peter Capaldi's Christmas special, so if you'll excuse me a moment, I'd like to drop the events of this premiere into a bit of context. When we left our Doctor, Peter Capaldi had been fighting his regeneration. Who can blame him? So recently dispatched from some kind of strange misadventure on the event horizon of a black hole aboard a 400-mile-long ship filled with human beings transitioning themselves into Mondasian Cybermen because a disruption in the environmental controls brought on by his longtime frenemy, the Master, who, last we'd seen him, was also focused on the genocidal transformation of humanity, only that time into himself for reasons. The Doctor was injured in this showdown with John Sim as the Master and Michelle Gomez as the Mistress. Stephanie Hyam as Heather, a puddle alien in love with the Doctor's companion, Pearl Mackie as erstwhile cybergal Bill Potts, gets him away from that nutty situation and abandons the Doctor along with his TARDIS somewhere in Antarctica in the mid-1980s so as to encounter David Bradley as his first incarnation, the First Doctor, that role created by William Hartnell. That's all well and good. Heck, those were even the Cybermen that Hartnell was facing when he regenerated for the very first time, so nice callback. After some running about, both Doctors regenerate, Hartnell into Second Doctor Patrick Troughton, and Capaldi into Jodie Whittaker. You're going to hear her called the 13th Doctor a lot, and I've covered this before, I think most recently in episode 17, but all the way back in episode 2 I was talking about how Paul McGann's Doctor had regenerated at some point into John Hurt as the War Doctor, who then at some point regenerated into Christopher Eccleston, who was introduced throughout the reboot series as number 9, tossed off as, well, when he was fighting the Daleks during the Time War, John Hurt didn't call himself the Doctor. All well and good, but as I've mentioned elsewhere, his body doesn't care what he calls himself. He could call himself Eleanor and marry a president, but it still counts as his 8th regeneration into the 9th door knocker on the left. So with McGann as the 8th and last of the on-screen handoffs, it goes John Hurt, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant again, his mid-character regeneration triggering a meta-crisis in his companion, Catherine Tate as Donna Noble in Journey's End. For those needing a reminder, I'm still on topic for this podcast. That one's recorded on disc X49 in my current collection. The 11th entry in my blog catalog from, 1 year ago this week. More than 140 discs ago, my word. Then on to Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, and Jodie Whittaker, the at least 15th regeneration of this remarkable character, and thus far a bang-up interpretation. Quick recap, an alien named Tim Shaw
There are some who call me Tim?
has traveled to Earth, to Sheffield, England even, to beg a human trophy. He's supposed to track them and kill them without the use of technology, but he's a big cheat and sends a big ball of wires out ahead of him to identify his quarry and plant quantum cellular bombs to liquidate the DNA of any potential witnesses. can't liquidate them until he takes their teeth. However, since that's his trophy, he takes teeth from his prey and sticks them into his face.
Oh, death awaits you with nasty, sharp, pointy teeth.
That's Sim Shaw and his big, cheaty, writhy ball of wires, his hunting dog, as it were, who in fact has tracked his prey, a late-night crane operator named Carl, but I'm telling this story backwards in hopes that it makes more sense. Tosin Cole as Ryan Sinclair is vlogging. He's got dyspraxia, an inner ear problem that makes riding a bike very difficult, but his gran, Sharon Clark as Grace O'Brien, and her husband, Bradley Walsh as Graham, take him up a hill overlooking Sheffield to try to help him learn. It's not happening. He falls, gets frustrated, throws the bike over the edge, and it gets lost in a wooded area. Graham and Grace say it's on him to retrieve it, and they board the last train back to town. Ryan looks around for his bike, but is shocked to discover some kind of energy portal, a sort of generated doorbell floating in midair, which he pushes, and suddenly a large, deep blue, impossibly cold, garlic bulb-shaped object appears. He calls the large, strange object into the police, like you do, and the call is taken by Mandip Gill as PC trainee Yasmin Khan, or Yaz. Best guess is they were friends at school. She investigates as police receive another call. Not too far away, a train is stopped by some sort of large, writhy, wiry ball of cheating hunting tech. They board the train as the ball appears at each of the passengers in turn. Grace, Graham, Yaz, Ryan, and Carl. It seems to have found whatever it's looking for when there's a thud, and a woman in a long black coat has appeared, apparently having fallen to earth. She assesses the situation, says some things, including to Yaz, "Why are you calling me madam?" "Well, you're a woman." "Does it suit me? Half an hour ago I was a white-haired Scotsman." She does the thing that happens to all doctors post-regeneration these days. They succumb to the plot device wherein they pass out for enough time for the situation to become grave. To it, Sim Shaw emerges from the blue thing, transferred, we are led to understand, from 5,000 galaxies away. This show is fantastic. Even without a TARDIS, at the moment of the Doctor's regeneration, she was flung through the front door of the TARDIS, which I'm certain has fueled message boards' reactions of, "Oh look, the TARDIS has rejected this one," or some wag about lady drivers, which I'll admit was the first thing that occurred to me, but that's simply unfair. The Doctor had been leaking regenerative energy for hours at this point. He knew it was happening, and while it's become a tradition for the Doctor to leave his new self a real mess to clean up, leaving the front door wide open, well, that feels like that was entirely on him. It also raises a question about the Doctor appearing in Sheffield in, it would appear, 2018. The TARDIS had taken off from 1986 Antarctica, the setting for the events of the 10th Planet and Twice Upon a Time, so she wouldn't be falling into cell phones and YouTube, she'd be falling into VCRs and Maggie Thatcher. Another glass ceiling shattered there if they'd decided to follow the reference. The TARDIS was in flight at the time, so it could absolutely have gotten from 1986 to 2018 no issues. No issues with Antarctica to England, no real issues with her intact clothing, since she's going to be enveloped in regenerative energy on her plummet through our atmosphere. And here she is with no TARDIS, and the show can still explore how very little we know about the nature of space and time. If there's a leadership challenge on a planet 5,000 galaxies removed, it's insane that the challenger would be sent this far to collect his prey with no technology, unless this is a species that has gotten really comfortable with the notion of time and physical distance. We are already positing quantum tunneling as a perfectly ordinary mechanism in the production of solar energy, so much plasma mass under so much pressure that subatomic particles are transformed from hydrogen to helium and energy is released. So our awareness of physical reality on the macro scale glosses over mysteries at the micro scale that could, I guess, if one knew how to harness it, transfer a being from 5,000 galaxies that way to Earth. Given the sheer range of the TARDIS, it's basically another TARDIS. Vortex manipulation other species have figured out. The final episode of Season 10 featured a being who could transform a Cyberman back into a human. Human beings are just molecules, she said, easy to make, and with this Sim Shaw person, we've encountered a manipulation of space and time that allows you to leave one place 5,000 galaxies removed, presumably instantaneously. He seems none the worse for his trip, which, since that's how many actual light years removed, must translate as traveling far faster than light, which we don't know how that works. potentially quite well. At one point, Matt Smith's doctor confronted the scar in space-time his many, many years of traveling represented. It looked like the portal they had opened to the apocalypse world in Supernatural, only much larger and angrier. In reality, Gallifreyans have had to figure out the space-time manipulation to the extent that they can travel it safely and navigably, even to the potential for a paradox machine, so probably after several hundred years of some dude flying around in it, there wouldn't likely be any angry glowing scar in the fabric of space-time, particularly since the TARDIS is partially fueled by rift energy it absorbs and keeps Cardiff from falling into another dimension, which, what did Cardiff do before TARDISes? Just get metaphysically weird? And mostly by an Eye of Harmony, which should limit that kind of damage anyway. What we did get to see, Doctor without a TARDIS, is Doctor having to be quite clever. First, she remembered her name, which was just part of the rebuilding process. Where there's wrong to right, where there's bad to fight, when there are people to help, that's where she'll be. Again, call back to Matt Smith, this planet is under protection, so Zim Shah should have stepped clear, but stakes. There's always got to be stakes. Putting this to bed right here, by the way, the Doctor confronts him at the end of the high-flying action sequence up a crane where Zimshaw goes after Carl. She saves Carl from Zimshaw and then scolds Carl for shoving him from the crane. Honestly, a being so intuitively aware of space and time isn't likely to succumb in a fall, but Ryan's Grand Grace, sadly, wasn't so lucky. She was climbing up the crane for no good reason when she lost her hold and fell to Earth, thus becoming the title character for this episode. She died seeking to help any way she could, and became an icon of inspiration for the Doctor's new team, Ryan, Yaz, and Grace's widower, Graham. In and among these developments, the Doctor built herself a sonic Swiss Army knife, except without the knife, which is also brilliant because I've gotten instantly tired of her swashing around to Capaldi's sonic sunglasses like Trinity from The Matrix. She incorporated Sheffield steel she smelted herself in some random alleyway garage they all broke into. Doctor without a TARDIS is also Doctor without a workspace, so that was pretty makeshift. Then used the sonic to craft a complicated transmat device which somehow incorporated a microwave. It was supposed to transmit the Doctor, and just the Doctor, to coordinates tracked from the TARDIS's energy. Instead, it transmitted the Doctor along with Ryan, Yaz, and Graham actually into open space. What a cliffhanger! It's charming that the Doctor cobbled together such a functional transmat device from such tech as can be found around your home, while at the same time having such a goof as unexpectedly bringing her crew along with her to a place where her TARDIS was not, and her oh crap reaction face when she realizes she's so terrifyingly endangered them. Well, new Doctor, new problems. At least she's got a new kit for this adventure. Capaldi's jacket was so the worse for wear by the end of this episode, so Yaz and them took her shopping. Looks mostly functional. I'd have thought these shades of Jack Hartnett's greatcoat would get in the way, but she hasn't really had to fuss with separates up to this point. Assuming she reconnects with her TARDIS, no guarantees, the third Doctor was grounded for a good long time, she'll have the run of her wardrobe, and she's got tons of clothes in there. Can't wait to see what she goes with.
Friday Night Feature.
In my Friday Night Feature, I wanted to talk about 4th season episode of Boston Legal, The Mighty Rogues, which resurfaced in this cataloging effort on disc 557. What's interesting about it, apart from seeing Candice Bergen in a better project, more on that in a bit, was how incredibly current the themes remained. For one thing, Christian Clemenson as Jerry Espenson appears to have used confidence-building pheromones in pursuit of a beautiful love interest. She sues for being made chemically predisposed to fall in love with him without her knowledge and against her will. Tara Summers as Katie Lloyd helps him navigate this pre-Cosby trial negotiation. Jerry, an Aspie who suffers from physical and verbal tics, clamps a drinking straw between his teeth and assumes a gruff, somewhat crass persona to express himself most freely, but Katie rightly determines that move would be disastrous in this context, and forces him to express himself as, well, himself. First, let me say I have thought deeply about my actions, for which I conclude I have no excuse. Accordingly, I will not seek to proffer any. The thing about love is people often try to remake themselves in their lover's eyes, especially in new relationships. We want to present the most flattering version of ourselves. We want to seem smarter, funnier. We pretend to be something we're not. I wanted you to think I was more confident than I am. I wanted you to feel safer with me than women typically feel. I wanted to have an edge, which clearly I do not enjoy. You're a beautiful woman. I am an odd man who stutters, purrs, coos, squeaks with all the self-confidence of a mayfly. All of this is to say I did a remarkably stupid, unforgivable thing, because I have fallen in love with you, and I am desperate for you to fall in love with me. Fragile and vulnerable, which ultimately allows them to reach a resolution. Even more ridiculous than a case of sexual assault against the besotted Jerry Espenson, however, John Larroquette as Carl Sack argues for the mega-rich community of Nantucket to purchase nuclear weapons, arguing that they would prefer a more reliable defense than that available from, say, the United States Armed Forces. The court is predictably unmoved by the suggestion and rejects it out of hand. More involved is the case mounted by Candice Bergen as Shirley Schmidt to provide palliative care for her father in the late stages of Alzheimer's, broken, in constant pain, experiencing no joy in living. The court is sympathetic but unwilling to authorize what will amount to euthanasia, running a morphine drip until he drifts out of consciousness. In the end, compassion wins out, but it drove home the importance of durable living wills while exploring the need for death with dignity. There was just the one episode of Boston Legal in this set, but wow, they packed a lot of episode into that episode.
Diving into the classic collection.
Speaking of everything old is new again, a 6th season episode of The Shield titled Baptism by Fire grabbed my attention as I was cataloging it. It calls back Forrest Whitaker as LA's Farmington District Internal Affairs investigator Jon Kavanaugh and his investigation into Michael Chiklis as Vic Mackey, the early days of his investigation where he was nosing around Mackey's estranged wife, Corinne, trying to get information about where her money was coming from. Vic meets up with Kavanaugh's ex, Sadie, played by Gina Torres, who, I've got to say, has crazy and disruptive down cold. He beds her in a move calculated to drive John crazy and make his investigation look like a personal vendetta. As this episode unfolds, Kavanaugh seeks to reestablish the rapport he's laid in with Corinne, which only gets very creepy and uncomfortable, witnessed as it is by Corinne's daughter, Cassidy, and Corinne confronts Kavanaugh at the station. What are you doing to my husband?
Ex-husband.
I know you hate Vic. That doesn't give you a right to destroy my family. Vic had Lem killed because he was a threat. Evidence proves it. I don't believe you. I don't believe any of this.
Let's talk somewhere in private.
Get off me. Where do you want to go? To my house? Put your hands all over me again? Pin me against the door? Try to screw me to get back at Vic in some demented, twisted way?
I only asked questions.
You used your badge to get into my house, and then you tried to touch me. I didn't feel safe.
Corinne,
no.
Listen to me.
He entered my house under false pretenses, and he tried to sexually assault me. I want to file charges. Are you sure about this? Take my statement, or I'm going to file charges somewhere else. That exchange, dating to 2007, and thank you to the script service at springfield.co.uk, grabbed my attention for several reasons, not least of which Kathy Kalin Ryan's compelling exchange with Forrest Whitaker, but a woman calling Kavanaugh out for attempted sexual assault. Regardless of what you feel about the nomination, hearings, and outcome, encountering that dialogue at exactly this moment in history was, truth be told, completely interesting to me. In other discoveries, I encountered a few episodes of Doctor Who, one the Christmas special with David Tennant and Kylie Minogue, who, oh, that just reminded me, typing this, I'll have to track down the 2 mini-seasons of, I think it was ABC's Gallivant, which also featured her in the 2nd season premiere, because they were both aired during the Dark Ages for this collection. But in that situation, a spaceship called the USS Titanic somehow breached the dimensional interface between the exterior of the TARDIS and its interior, which shouldn't really be possible or even look like that if it did, but again, it's generally pretty cool when shows raise questions that make you think about things in new and different ways. The other one, Tennant's adventure with John Sim and Freema Agyeman in The Last of the Time Lords, that title puts a finger on a point I've raised before now, and was glossed over too easily in the season 11 premiere, when Jodie's doctor asserts that she has no family. That's simply not true. She's got all of the memories 12 carried when coming the long way around through the confession dial, and facing down the General, even Jenna Coleman as Clara, pulled out of her time stream at the last possible second and flying around out there somewhere with Maisie Williams as an immortal named Me in a diner-shaped spaceship. Not family exactly, but she's also got a daughter, played by 5th Doctor Peter Davison's actual daughter, Georgia Moffat, in the Season 4 episode The Doctor's Daughter, the coda of which shows the Doctor's regenerated daughter sailing out into the universe somewhere, and how would that not come to, at that time, his attention, particularly when Matt Smith's Doctor was out scouring all of space and time for Melody Pond in Season 6. Smith's Doctor, incidentally, is cited, apparently canonically, as starting Time Lords can access more than 800 regenerative cycles, giving the lie to the Tom Baker-era limitation of 12, this reasserted in Colin Baker's run, although the Time Lord, not Trinity, Matrix Collective would be aware of the number of regenerations the Doctor would have just from its collected wisdom over all of space and time. The Doctor's had 2 fixed points in time to face down in New Mexico and in Trenzalore, and he's shoved through both just fine, one by inhabiting a humanoid craft as a miniaturized version of himself, and another just by talking about it a lot, although River Song sacrificing the balance of her regenerative energy to the Doctor over his vehement protests at least covers why she died for real in Season 4's Forest of the Dead God. I am such a geek. Yep, moving on to my current collection. Oh, yeah, closing that out. Jodie's Doctor should totally go find her daughter. But yeah, I had a chance to watch a few nerd shows recently and was puzzled. I've got something called The Planets and Beyond, hosted by Professor and former astronaut Michael J. Massimino, probably most recognizable for having appeared as himself when launching Simon Helbig as engineer Howard Wolowitz into space on The Big Bang Theory. The show ended up being about twice as long as it should have been, and running scraps of script through the Googleator, it appears to Frankenstein a couple different productions together into one. One focuses on the moons of our solar system, seemingly word for word a Season 1 episode of How the Universe Works, repackaged with new overlay graphics and then seamlessly combined into some project called Jupiter, the Sun's secret twin. Not completely unrelated, given Jupiter's ostentatious contingent of moons, but originally produced as at least a couple of different projects. I'm certain I've encountered this sort of thing before, science shows that are repackaged and then rebroadcast episodically as part of this new series or that. In this case, narrative structure from Massimino, or Mass, is woven through the project to provide necessary linkage, as well as new titles and bumper graphics that combines to give us the second season finale of The Planets and Beyond, Alien Moons, The Next Earth. It's a little wackadoo, but more tolerably researched, produced, and fact-based in terms of programming than this National Geographic production I watched called Star Talk, wherein astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson interviews scientists and then cuts away from these interviews to talk to, well, in the case of this conversation with theoretical physicist Brian Greene, he cuts away from Greene's discussion of such topics as the multiverse and hidden dimensions to get reactions from studio guests, comedian Maeve Higgins and philosopher David Chalmers, in front of a live studio audience. I'd never seen this show before. It seems a bit ridiculous. I've got Neil deGrasse Tyson interviewing Brian Greene. I'm good. I don't need context or studio audience reactions or cutaways. Not comedian Chuck Nice conducting man-on-the-street interviews regarding what the general public knows about physics, or Bill Nye coming in at the end to talk about, I'm sorry, I've completely forgotten. Just, when Nova gave Brian Greene an entire episode to explore advances in string theory and talk about phenomena at the quantum level, we got to explore these ideas with a certain amount of clarity. This seemed a lot more disjointed. It's like, I'm astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. Here with me tonight is theoretical physicist Lisa Randall to talk about the search for dark matter in the Milky Way galaxy, and here to interrupt her are comedian Sarah Silverman and actor Jim Parsons, who, while he portrays theoretical physicist Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory, has basically said out loud he really doesn't know about any of this stuff. Take it away, Jim! I'm afraid Star Talk on National Geographic will be a deliberate pass from here on out.
Current collection.
Which takes me to my current direct-to-DVD collection. I was going to highlight the addition of Netflix series BoJack Horseman to Comedy Central's lineup last time, and I completely forgot. As of this writing, I've seen 3 installments of this animated production, now in its 5th season, which just premiered on Netflix, and I am not yet convinced. The show is an odd universe inhabited by anthropomorphized creatures, well, actual animals, but people-sized, sharing this space with people. Title character Bojack, a horse voiced by Will Arnett, is a washed-up former 90s sitcom star of Horsin' Around, goofy father figure for 3 orphaned children, who, along with ticking people off, such as would include his former girlfriend and current agent, a cat, Princess Carolyn, voiced by Amy Sedaris, Patton Oswalt as the Penguin whose publishing empire is standing or falling on Bojack's complete lack of progress on his memoir, Bojack's former co-star, this one a person, Sarah Lynn, voiced by Kristen Schaal, tracing a bad vector out of child stardom, Ayla, a drug-crazed, self-mutilating Olsen twin. He's dealing with current romantic interest Diane Nguyen, a person and ghostwriter voiced by Alison Brie, who herself is dating her current romantic interest Paul F. Tompkins as Peanut Butter, a golden retriever who also starred in the 90s sitcom on a competing network where he'd adopted 3 orphaned children. Dark? Well, yeah, I'd forgotten to mention Todd, voiced by Aaron Paul, who is crashing on his couch. So, yeah, it's dark and kind of bleak. It's animated, and there's drugs and inappropriate sex and strangely matter-of-fact acceptance of not great realities. So far, it's a stark examination of the pointlessness of existence, which, okay, yeah, you can get some traction on that, but put that up against NBC's continued tour de force ethics and metaphysical exploration, The Good Place. The difference in vibe, pointfulness, and wonderfulness in terms of storytelling is glaring and juxtaposed. I'm not sure why I'm the same person watching both shows. The fact is, however, people I trust are really into this cartoon, which frankly is a departure from cookie-cutter storytelling, and I'm certainly getting more than a glimpse of existential angst in these opening episodes, so I'm absolutely giving it more of a chance to win me over. Callback here, but speaking of cartoony, as ridiculous as Boston Legal so often was, I've got to say it's somewhat less cartoony than the Murphy Brown reboot on CBS. I've also seen 3 episodes of this one so far, and I've got to say, as liberal wish fulfillment, you couldn't get much more outrageous than former Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton walking on set and applying for work as Candace Bergen as Murphy Brown's secretary. You've got Tyne Daly behind the bar they all hang out at mid-morning after their morning shows, where they've basically just already spent hours talking to each other, along occasionally, when the plot calls for it, Nick Dodani as tech advisor Pat Patel and Aiden Rocha as Miguel Gonzalez. The first episode was as ripped from the headlines as when Dan Quayle actually talked about her TV persona having a child out of wedlock. In this case, Murphy recalls having dated now President Donald Trump at one point, well, in her capacity as actress Candace Bergen. I'm not sure she ever got as far as Stormy Daniels seems to have, but I guess that's a book we'll all just have to wait for. She mentions this on the air and gets into a live tweet storm with the Commander-in-Chief. In the second episode, she sneaks into the press briefing room and calls press spokesman Sarah Huckabee Sanders on her inaccessibility and, as Murphy characterizes it, playing free and loose with facts, called for the entire White House press corps to follow her out the door, embarrassing her son, who'd taken a commentator post at CNC rival Wolf News. Guess what that's in reference to. And this past week, she took on a sexual predator from her past, no, not that one, a professor who'd rattled her so badly she'd actually left a journalism award behind as she fled the scene all those years ago. She was rattled afresh upon discovering his den was something like a shrine to her. She confronted him about his grooming her for abuse, contributing to her victim blaming all these years later, the night she'd won that award, plying her with drinks and trying to get his hands on her thighs. In his memory, he recalled her having flirted with him overwhelmingly, but she rejected that interpretation and ultimately walked out of his home with her trophy. That was probably the best of the 3 episodes so far, but still unworthy, and if these shows are going to continue to be written with the breadth and subtlety of the comment section on Yahoo News, I'm going to tune out. There's just too much to watch on Thursday nights. I haven't even talked about the season 14 premiere of Supernatural on the CW yet, and this isn't even as good as the more disappointing than not actually necessary 2nd or 11th season resume of Will and Grace. Will is teaching classes now, which totally seems like a logical arc for his character. But since we're here, The Good Place on NBC is absolutely fantastic. As of this week, the team of humans trying to be better and hopefully maybe stay out of the bad places, winding down their year-long ethical struggle. They're drifting apart, and one-time demon and now spiritual advisor somehow, Ted Danson as Michael, tries to keep them working together and potentially injects new enthusiasm for this study by inadvertently revealing the supernatural aspect of their situation. Tune in next week, folks. This will be a doozy. Superstore was absolutely phenomenal, with an almost Curb Your Enthusiasm escalation of social pressures culminating in something like a half-dozen baby showers all going on at once at Cloud 9, while Dina does an outrageous photo shoot with Mateo, and Will and Grace was actively pointless about a spiritual crisis for who cares. So, finally, the season 14 premiere of Supernatural. Honestly, I'm not sure what they could have done. They had like 2 minutes of previously on Supernatural, which could have just been Dean being possessed by the Archangel Michael. They established life at the bunker. The once superpowered Nephilim Jack, his grace drained by Lucifer, head of his throwdown with Michael, is training with the still-alive Apocalypse World version of Bobby. Sam is reconciled with his so-long estranged mother Mary as they combine forces with British Men of Letters operative Ketch to search for Dean. Also on hand is the once Lucifer-possessed meat suit Nick, who, now that Michael slew Lucifer, how on earth is he still intact and not stark raving mad? Anyway, they're called in to help when the Angel Castiel confronts what turns out to be an entire tavern full of demons, including Kip, one would-be pretender to the King of Hell. They short-circuit his ambitions. As Sam says, there will be no King of Hell, and any such would run through him. So, that sets the stakes for season 14, except for, this little detail. The Michael-possessed Dean is walking the earth, seeking for terrorists and murderers and sinners to discover what it is they want. They are generally judged unworthy and thus dispatched. By the end of the episode, he encounters a vampire and seems to throw in with him in what would probably be an endgame of the destruction of all humanity, remaking our world in the image of the apocalypse world he'd breezed in from. Exciting! Not sure 14 seasons in how or if they're going to be able to keep this fresh. The bar brawl with demons absolutely had some good energy, but yeah, as seasons go, this one got off to a good start. Better Call Saul's season finale was this past week. I'm still processing that here, honestly, but wow. And in a season of callbacks, next week we'll be returning to the murder house from the first season of American Horror Story, where previews gave us a glimpse of Jessica Lange creation Constance Langdon. So I guess we'll see where they're taking us next with that. Beyond that, thank you so much for checking in on my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at VideoFuzzy.blogspot.com and past episodes at Apple Podcast. Feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog or podcast sites or through my VideoFuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJVideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.